The rain came down like bullets that February evening. The kind of rain that soaks through your coat in seconds and chills you right to the bone. Inside the small bookstore on Maple Street, old Mr. Chen was doing what he did every night at closing time. He walked slowly between the tall wooden shelves, running his wrinkled fingers along the spines of books that had been sitting there for months, sometimes years. At 72 years old, Mr. Chen moved like time itself had slowed down just for him. His back was a little bent, his steps careful and measured. The bookstore had been his whole world for almost 40 years now. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was worn thin in places, the walls needed paint, and half the light bulbs flickered when you turned them on. But it was his place, his kingdom of stories and silence. Business wasn't what it used to be. These days, people bought their books from their phones while sitting on the toilet. They didn't come to dusty old shops anymore. Some days, Mr. Chen would sit behind the counter for hours without a single customer walking through that door. His wife used to joke that he was running a library, not a business. But she'd been gone for 8 years now, and the joke didn't seem funny anymore. He'd just locked the cash register and was reaching for his coat when he saw something through the rain-streaked window, a shape huddled in the doorway outside. At first, he thought it was just a pile of garbage or some old boxes the wind had blown there. But then the shape moved. Mr. Chen squinted through his glasses and stepped closer to the window. It was a kid, a teenage boy curled up like a cat trying to stay dry. Even from inside, Mr. Chen could see the boy was shivering so hard his whole body was shaking. Now, Mr. Chen wasn't stupid. He'd lived in the city long enough to know that helping strangers could go wrong in 100 different ways. His daughter called him every Sunday from California and always reminded him to be careful, to keep his doors locked, to not trust people. The world wasn't safe anymore, she'd say. If it ever was, but looking at that kid shaking in the cold, Mr. Chen couldn't just walk away. He thought about his own grandson, safe and warm in some college dorm 3,000 miles away. What if that was his grandson out there? What if someone walked past and did nothing? He unlocked the door and pulled it open. The wind tried to rip it from his hands. The boy looked up and Mr. Chen saw his face for the first time. He couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. His lips had gone pale, almost blue. His hair was plastered to his head, and his thin jacket looked like it had given up trying to keep him warm about 3 hours ago. "You're going to freeze to death out here," Mr. Chen said, loud enough to be heard over the storm. "Come inside." The boy just stared at him. His eyes were dark and wary, like a stray dog that's been kicked too many times to trust a kind hand. "I'm not going to hurt you," Mr. Chen said, softer this time. "Just come in and get warm. That's all." The boy looked left, then right, like he was checking for a trap. Then slowly, he unfolded himself from the doorway and stumbled inside. Water dripped off him onto the worn carpet, forming a small puddle. He kept his backpack clutched tight against his chest, like it was the only thing in the world that belonged to him. Mr. Chen locked the door behind them and flipped the closed sign. "What's your name, son?" "David," the boy said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. "David Rodriguez. Well, David, I'm Mr. Chen. You look like you could use some tea, and maybe a towel." He led the boy to the back room where he kept a little hot plate, some tea bags, and a chair he'd nap in sometimes on slow afternoons. There was an old couch there, too, covered with a blanket his wife had knitted 20 years ago. It had holes in it now, but it was still warm. David stood there dripping, looking confused, like he couldn't figure out what the catch was. Nobody did something for nothing. That's what life had taught him. "Sit," Mr. Chen said, pointing at the couch. "I'll make tea." While the water heated up, Mr. Chen found an old towel and handed it to David. The boy dried his face and hair but kept that backpack on his lap, arms wrapped around it like a life preserver. "When did you last eat?" Mr. Chen asked. David shrugged. "Yesterday morning. Maybe." Mr. Chen found half a sandwich he'd brought for lunch and hadn't finished. It wasn't much, but David ate it like it was a 5-star meal, trying not to look too hungry but failing completely. The tea was ready. Mr. Chen poured 2 cups and sat down in his chair. They drank in silence for a while, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. "Where are you headed?" Mr. Chen finally asked. David wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "North, got an aunt up in Vancouver. She might let me stay with her. That's a long way from here." "Yeah." "How'd you end up in my doorway?" David was quiet for a long moment. Then the words started coming out, slow at first, then faster like water from a cracked dam. He'd been in a group home downstate. It was his 5th placement in 3 years. His mother had died when he was 12, some kind of cancer that ate her up in 6 months. His father was never in the picture. So David bounced from place to place, never quite fitting in anywhere. The last group home had been the worst. The older kids took his things. The staff didn't care. So one night, David just left. He'd been saving money from small jobs, mowing lawns, washing cars, whatever people would pay a kid cash for. He took a bus as far as his money would go, then hitchhiked, then walked. His wallet got stolen 2 days ago at a gas station while he was in the bathroom. Now he had nothing except what was in his backpack. Some clothes, a photo of his mom. That was it. I just need to make it to Vancouver, David said, staring into his tea. My aunt, she's the only family I got left.
She has to take me in.
She has to. Mr. Chen didn't say anything right away. He'd heard enough sadness in his 72 years to know that sometimes people just needed to get their story out. Words were like poison sometimes. You had to spit them out or they'd kill you from the inside. It's late, Mr. Chen finally said, and the storm's not letting up. You can sleep here tonight, on the couch. It's not comfortable, but it's dry. David looked up, suspicion creeping back into his eyes. Why would you do that? Mr. Chen thought about that question. Why would he? He didn't know this kid. David could rob him blind while he slept, could burn the place down, could be running from the police for all he knew. But then Mr. Chen thought about all the books on all those shelves in the next room. Every single one of them was a story about people making choices. Good choices, bad choices, brave choices, stupid choices. And in the end, people were remembered for the choices they made when it mattered. Because you need help, Mr. Chen said simply, and because I can help. It's not more complicated than that. David didn't say anything, but his shoulders relaxed just a little bit. Mr. Chen brought him the blanket from his wife and an extra pillow from the storage closet. Bathroom's through that door, he said. Lock the front when I leave. I'll be back in the morning to open the shop. You're not staying. I live 2 blocks away. Don't worry, nobody's going to bother you here. This neighborhood's been dead since midnight for the last 20 years. Mr. Chen put on his coat and headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Just for tonight, he said. We'll figure out tomorrow when tomorrow comes. But as he walked home through the rain, Mr. Chen had a feeling that tomorrow was going to be more complicated than he thought. One night turned into 2. Then 2 turned into a week. Then a week turned into something nobody had planned for. David was still sleeping on that old couch in the back room, and Mr. Chen was starting to wonder if he'd made a terrible mistake. His friends at the senior center certainly thought so. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Mr. Chen played cards with the same group of old men he'd known for 20 years. They'd survived wars, raised families, and buried spouses together. They didn't hold back their opinions. You're crazy, Frank said, slapping down a card. You don't know this kid from Adam. He could slit your throat in your sleep. He's just looking for help, Mr. Chen said quietly. They're all just looking for help, George chimed in. Until they're looking through your wallet and your medicine cabinet. My nephew's a cop. You want me to have him run a background check? No, Mr. Chen said. I don't. Then you're a fool, Frank said, not unkindly. A kind-hearted fool, but a fool nonetheless. Maybe they were right. Mr. Chen had started noticing things. Small things at first. A pack of cigarettes hidden behind the philosophy section. $40 missing from the register one morning. David disappearing for hours without saying where he was going. Coming back smelling like smoke and something else Mr. Chen couldn't quite identify. Mr. Chen wanted to believe the best in people. His wife used to say that was his greatest weakness and his greatest strength all rolled into one. But doubt was creeping in like cold water through a crack in a dam. The thing was, when David was actually in the shop, he was helpful. He'd reorganized the entire mystery section without being asked. He'd figured out how to fix the temperamental coffee maker that Mr. Chen had been fighting with for 3 years. He even cleaned the bathroom, which was a miracle in itself. But there were moments when David would just shut down. His face would go blank, like someone had turned off all the lights behind his eyes. He'd sit in the corner staring at nothing, and if Mr. Chen tried to talk to him, David would snap like a cornered animal. I'm fine, he'd say. Just leave me alone. And Mr. Chen would leave him alone because he didn't know what else to do. He'd raised a daughter, sure, but she'd been easy. Good grades, good friends, good choices. This was different. This was like trying to help someone who didn't want to be helped. or didn't believe they deserved to be helped, or maybe both. 3 weeks in, things came to a head. Mr. Chen was counting the register at the end of the day when he realized another $60 was gone. He'd been keeping closer track since the first incident, and now he was sure. The money was disappearing, and there was only one person it could be. His hands shook a little as he closed the register drawer. Not from fear, from disappointment. He'd wanted so badly to believe that his instinct about David had been right. That underneath all that anger and defensiveness was a good kid who just needed a chance. David came out of the back room with his backpack slung over one shoulder, clearly about to head out for one of his mysterious evening disappearances. "We need to talk," Mr. Chen said. David froze. "About what?" "Money's been going missing from the register. $60 today, $40 last week." For a second, David's face showed something that might have been guilt, but then it hardened into something else. "Something sharp and defensive, and you think I took it?" David said flatly. "Did you?" The silence stretched out between them like a rubber band pulled too tight, ready to snap. "You know what?" David said, his voice rising. "Yeah, I took it. You happy now? Feel good about yourself for figuring it out?" Mr. Chen felt something crack inside his chest. "Why? Why?" David laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Because I needed it. Because I'm not your charity case. Because I don't need to explain myself to some old man who's just keeping me around because he's lonely and pathetic and has nothing better to do with his time." Each word hit Mr. Chen like a physical blow. He stood there behind the counter, this 72-year-old man with his worn cardigan and his quiet bookshop, and felt foolish. Small. Used. "I opened my home to you," Mr. Chen said softly. "I fed you, gave you shelter, asked for nothing in return." "Nobody gives something for nothing," David shot back. "There's always a catch, always an angle. You're probably going to ask me for something eventually, some weird favor or something creepy. That's how it always works." "That's not fair," Mr. Chen said, his voice cracking. "I never... Fair?" David's voice was getting louder now, angrier. "You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that my mom died puking her guts out from chemo? Is it fair that my dad didn't even show up to her funeral? Is it fair that I've been shuffled around like a piece of garbage for the last 4 years? Don't talk to me about fair, old man." The words hung in the air between them. Mr. Chen could see the hurt behind David's anger now, could see how scared this kid was underneath all that rage. But he was hurt too. His friends had been right. He'd been a fool. "I think you should go," Mr. Chen said quietly. David stared at him. "What?" "I said you should go. I'm too old for this. Too old to be yelled at in my own shop. Too old to be stolen from. Too old to help someone who doesn't want to be helped." "Fine," David said, his jaw tight. "I'll go. I didn't want to be here anyway. This place is depressing. You're depressing, sitting here day after day with your dusty books and your dead wife's blanket, pretending like any of this matters." That was the line. The thing you don't say to a man whose wife died and left a hole in his life the size of the ocean. Mr. Chen felt tears prick at his eyes, and he hated himself for it. "Get out," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please just get out." David grabbed his backpack and stormed toward the door. He yanked it open so hard the little bell above it nearly came off. Then he paused, his back to Mr. Chen. For a moment, Mr. Chen thought he might apologize, might take it back, might show some glimpse of the kid Mr. Chen had hoped he was. But David just walked out into the street and disappeared into the evening crowd. The door swung shut behind him with a sad little chime. Mr. Chen stood there alone in his bookshop, surrounded by thousands of stories, but living in one that had just gone terribly wrong. He thought about calling someone, his daughter maybe, or Frank and the guys, but he couldn't bear to hear them say they'd told him so. Instead, he just turned off the lights and went home. The next morning, Mr. Chen opened the shop like he always did, made his tea, set up the register, dusted some shelves, all the normal things. But the bookshop felt emptier than it had in years. Emptier even than when his wife first died and he'd come here to hide from the silence in his house. He told himself it was for the best. David was trouble, a thief and a liar with a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas. Mr. Chen had dodged a bullet. Who knew what the kid might have done eventually? Stolen more? Gotten violent? Brought his troubled friends around? But then why did Mr. Chen keep looking at the door hoping it would open? Why did he keep listening for footsteps in the back room? Why did he leave the couch made up with fresh sheets, the blanket folded neatly at one end. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. Mr. Chen went through the motions of living. He opened the shop, sold a few books, closed the shop, ate a dinner alone, watched television he didn't care about, went to bed, got up. Did it all again? Frank and the guys asked how the kid situation had worked out. He moved on, Mr. Chen said, and left it at that. They nodded knowingly, and he hated them for being right almost as much as he hated himself for being wrong. 3 weeks after David left, Mr. Chen was closing up on a Thursday evening when he heard a tap on the glass. His heart jumped, but when he looked up, it wasn't David. Just some college kid asking if they were still open. They weren't. The kid left. Mr. Chen stood there with his hand on the light switch, feeling foolish for hoping. David was gone. That part of his life was over. Time to accept it and move on. He locked the door and had just turned to get his coat when he heard another sound, softer this time, almost like scratching. He turned around. Through the glass, he could see a figure in the doorway, hunched over, familiar. Mr. Chen's breath caught in his throat. He rushed to the door and unlocked it. David was there, but he looked nothing like the angry kid who'd stormed out 3 weeks ago. His face was a mess. A black eye, swollen and purple, a split lip, crusted with dried blood, fresh bruises on his jaw and neck. His jacket was torn. "I'm sorry," David whispered. His voice was so small, so broken. "I didn't know where else to go." Mr. Chen didn't hesitate. He pulled the door open wide and helped David inside, his old hand surprisingly steady. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you cleaned up." And just like that, all the anger Mr. Chen had been carrying around for 3 weeks just evaporated. Because standing in front of him wasn't a thief or a troublemaker, just a scared, hurt kid who had nowhere else to turn. Sometimes the people who push you away the hardest are the ones who need you the most. Mr. Chen didn't ask questions. Not right away. He just helped David to the back room and sat him down on that old couch. The same couch where this whole thing had started weeks ago. "Stay here," Mr. Chen said. "I'll get ice." He went to the small freezer in the corner where he kept ice packs for his bad knee and wrapped one in a dish towel. When he came back, David was sitting exactly where he'd left him, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him whole. "Here," Mr. Chen said gently, handing him the ice pack. "For your eye." David took it and pressed it against his face, wincing. Up close, the damage looked worse. The black eye was spectacular, purple and blue and angry red all at once. The split lip was swollen to twice its normal size. There were finger-shaped bruises on his neck that made Mr. Chen's stomach turn. "Are you hungry?" Mr. Chen asked. David nodded without looking up. Mr. Chen heated up some soup on the hot plate. It was just canned chicken noodle, nothing fancy, but it was warm and it was food. He poured it into a bowl and set it on the small table next to David along with some crackers. David ate slowly, carefully, like his jaw hurt. Probably did. Mr. Chen sat in his chair across from him and waited. He'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the best thing you could do for someone was just be there. Not talking, not fixing, just there. When David finished eating, he set the bowl down and finally looked up at Mr. Chen. His good eye was wet. "I'm sorry," he said again, "for what I said. About your wife. About this place. I didn't mean it. I was just angry." "I know," Mr. Chen said. "No, you don't know," David said, his voice cracking. "You don't know what it's like. Everyone I've ever cared about either dies or leaves or gives up on me. So I make them leave first, before they can hurt me. Because at least then I'm in control, you know? At least then I chose it." Mr. Chen felt something shift in his chest, a door opening that he'd kept locked for a long time. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "My wife died 8 years ago. Cancer. She was sick for 2 years before that, and I watched her disappear piece by piece until there was nothing left but bones and breath. And when she finally died, I was relieved. Can you believe that? Relieved, because watching her suffer was worse than losing her." David looked up at him, surprise in his eyes. "I felt so guilty about that," Mr. Chen continued. "For years I thought I was a terrible person. A terrible husband. What kind of man feels relieved when his wife dies? But you know what I figured out? Sometimes loving someone means being glad when their pain ends, even if it means yours is just beginning." "Why are you telling me this?" David asked quietly. "Because I want you to understand something. When you said those things about me being lonely and pathetic, about using you to fill some void in my life, Part of me wondered if you were right. Maybe I was just a sad old man trying to play hero. Maybe I was helping you to help myself. Mr. Chen leaned forward in his chair, his old bones creaking. But then you left, and I realized something. I wasn't helping you for me. I was helping you because you needed help. Simple as that. And yeah, maybe having you here made the shop feel less empty. Maybe it gave me something to care about besides dusty books and memories. But that doesn't make it wrong. Sometimes two broken people can help each other without anyone being used. David was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I took the money to buy drugs. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Chen felt his stomach drop, but he kept his face neutral. Okay, just weed, David continued quickly. Nothing hard. I wasn't like shooting up or anything, but I'd been smoking since I was 13. It was the only thing that made me feel normal. Made everything quiet up here. He tapped his head. But then I ran out of money and couldn't get more, and I got stupid. What happened? Mr. Chen asked, gesturing at David's face. David laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I owed this guy money. Not much, $50, but I couldn't pay him. And he doesn't do payment plans, you know? So he and his friends decided to teach me a lesson. I've been sleeping in parks and under bridges for 3 weeks, trying to stay invisible, trying to scrape together enough to get to Vancouver. Did you get it? The money? No, David said. I got this instead. He pointed at his face. And then I realized something while I was lying there getting my ass kicked. I'd rather be here getting lectured by you than out there getting beat up by strangers. At least you actually give a damn. Mr. Chen felt tears prick at his eyes for the second time in 3 weeks. He was getting soft in his old age. I need you to be honest with me, Mr. Chen said. Can you stop? The drugs? David thought about that. I don't know. Probably not if I'm living on the streets. But maybe if I had a reason to. Maybe if I wasn't spending every day just trying to survive. What if I gave you a reason? Mr. Chen said. What if I made you a deal? David looked at him warily. What kind of deal? You can stay here. Sleep on the couch. Eat my terrible canned soup. But you have to do 3 things. First, no more stealing. Not from me, not from anyone. You need money, you ask me. We'll figure it out. Okay, David said slowly. Second, you have to finish high school. I don't care if you go to a regular school or do it online or get your GED. But you have to finish. David nodded. And the third thing? You have to help me with the shop, real help. Not just dusting shelves when you feel like it. I need someone who can figure out this whole internet thing. Get us online. Maybe bring in some customers. This place is dying and I'm too old to save it by myself. That's it? David asked. That's the deal? That's the deal, Mr. Chen said. But here's the thing. This isn't charity. I'm not your dad or your therapist or your savior. I'm just a guy with a bookshop who could use some help. You work, you earn your keep. Fair trade. No one's doing anyone favors here. Something changed in David's face. The wariness faded a little, because Mr. Chen had figured out the key. David didn't want to be saved. He didn't want to be someone's project or someone's good deed. He wanted to be useful. To matter. Why? David asked. Why do you even care? Mr. Chen thought about that. Really thought about it. You know what's funny? He finally said. I've been running this shop for 40 years. I've sold thousands of books. Tens of thousands, probably. And you know what every single story in here has in common? David shook his head. Someone makes a choice, Mr. Chen said. That's it. That's the whole thing. Someone stands at a crossroads and decides to go left or right, to speak up or stay quiet, to help or walk away. And that one choice changes everything. The whole story spins out from that one moment. He gestured around at the shelves full of books. I stood at my crossroads the night I found you in my doorway. I could have walked past, gone home, called the cops maybe. A lot of people would have. But I chose to open the door. And yeah, it's been messy. You stole from me. You said mean things, you left. But you also came back. And that tells me something about who you really are underneath all the anger and hurt. What does it tell you? David asked quietly. That you're worth the trouble, Mr. Chen said simply. That's all. You're worth the trouble. David looked down at his hands. When he looked up again, tears were running down his face, mixing with the blood and dirt. I don't want to be broken anymore. He whispered. I'm so tired of being broken. Mr. Chen stood up slowly, his knees protesting, and sat down on the couch next to David. He put his arm around the kid's shoulders, and David collapsed against him like a puppet with its strings cut. He sobbed into Mr. Chen's cardigan and Mr. Chen just held him and let him cry. "Listen to me," Mr. Chen said softly. "Everyone's broken. Every single person walking around out there is carrying something. The trick isn't to not be broken. The trick is to not let the broken parts define you. You understand?" David nodded against his shoulder. "You've had a hard life, harder than most. And you've made some bad choices. But you're 17 years old. You've got so much time left to make better choices, to become someone different, someone you actually like." "You really think I can?" David asked, his voice muffled. "I know you can," Mr. Chen said, "but you have to want it. You have to decide that this is where your story changes, right here, right now, on this ugly couch in this dusty bookshop. This is your crossroads, David. What are you going to choose?" David pulled back and wiped his face on his sleeve. His eye was already starting to swell shut and his lip was bleeding again, but something in his expression had changed. He looked less like a cornered animal and more like a person who just remembered he was human. "I choose to stay," he said. "I choose to try." "Good," Mr. Chen said. "That's good. Now let me see that eye again. We might need to take you to urgent care." "I don't have insurance," David said. "I figured. Good thing I do. One of the perks of being old. Come on." They went to urgent care that night. David had a mild concussion, some bruised ribs, and needed 3 stitches in his lip. The doctor asked how it happened. Mr. Chen said David had been jumped by some teenagers trying to steal his backpack. The doctor didn't look like she believed them, but she patched David up anyway. When they got back to the shop, Mr. Chen made up the couch with clean sheets and his wife's blanket. David lay down exhausted from the pain medication. "Mr. Chen," he said, his voice sleepy. "Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me." "Thank you for coming back," Mr. Chen said. "Now get some sleep. We've got work to do tomorrow." He turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching David's breathing slow as he drifted off to sleep. Mr. Chen thought about all the books on his shelves, all those stories about people making choices, about heroes and villains and everyone in between, about second chances and redemption and hope. Maybe his life wasn't as boring as he thought. Maybe he was living in a pretty good story after all. He just hoped it would have a happy ending. The first few weeks after David came back were rough. Really rough. Quitting weed cold turkey wasn't as easy as either of them had hoped. David would get irritable, snapping at customers over nothing. He'd disappear into the bathroom for 20 minutes at a time. Some mornings he couldn't get out of bed, and Mr. Chen would find him curled up on the couch staring at the wall like a zombie. But slowly, day by day, things got better. David started sleeping through the night. His appetite came back. The darkness that had been living behind his eyes started to fade, just a little bit at a time. And true to his word, David started helping with the shop. Really helping. The first thing he did was convince Mr. Chen to let him set up a website. Mr. Chen was skeptical. He'd lived 72 years without needing the internet to sell books. Why start now? But David was persistent, and honestly, what did they have to lose? It took David 2 weeks, working late into the night, teaching himself from YouTube videos and free online courses. When he finally showed Mr. Chen the finished product, the old man had to admit he was impressed. The website was simple but clean. It had photos of the shop, a list of their inventory, and even a blog where Mr. Chen could write about his favorite books. "Who's going to read an old man's book recommendations?" Mr. Chen asked. "You'd be surprised," David said. "People love this authentic stuff. Not everything has to be polished and professional. Sometimes people just want to hear from someone who genuinely loves what they do." David was right. Within a month, the blog had a small but dedicated following. People from all over the city started coming in, asking for Mr. Chen personally, wanting to talk about the books he'd recommended. Some of them even bought things. Next, David tackled the shop's social media presence. He started an account and posted pictures of interesting book covers, quotes from classic novels, and short videos of Mr. Chen talking about his favorite authors. The videos were awkward at first. Mr. Chen was stiff on camera, self-conscious about his accent and his age, but David kept encouraging him. "Just be yourself," David said. "That's what makes it special." The turning point came when David posted a video of Mr. Chen talking about the first book his wife had ever given him. It was a worn copy of poetry that Mr. Chen kept behind the counter. In the video, Mr. Chen held the book gently like it might crumble in his hands, and talked about reading it to his wife during her last days in the hospital, how she'd smile when he got to certain passages, how she'd mouth the words along with him even when she was too weak to speak. The video went viral. Not celebrity viral, but viral for a small bookshop. 50,000 views, 100,000. Comments poured in from people saying they were crying, that this was what love looked like, that they were going to visit the shop. The local news even did a story about them. Business picked up. Not enough to make them rich, but enough to keep the lights on and put food on the table. Enough to matter. But the biggest change wasn't in the shop. It was in David. He'd signed up for an online high school program and was actually doing the work. Every morning before the shop opened, David would sit at the small table in the back room with his laptop, grinding through math problems and history essays. Mr. Chen would bring him tea and quietly read the paper while David studied. It wasn't easy. David had missed a lot of school over the years, and there were gaps in his knowledge the size of canyons. He'd call Mr. Chen over for help with algebra, and Mr. Chen would have to admit he'd forgotten most of it. So they'd figure it out together, two people who had no business trying to solve quadratic equations, laughing at their own confusion. English was easier. David was a natural writer. His essays were raw and honest and full of emotion. Mr. Chen would read them and be amazed at the talent hiding inside this kid who'd spent years convinced he was worthless. "You're good at this," Mr. Chen said once after reading an essay David had written about his mother. David shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's just words. Words matter," Mr. Chen said. "Trust me. I've been surrounded by them my whole life. You have a gift." Months passed, then a year, then 2 years. David turned 18, then 19. He finished his high school program and walked across a stage at a community center to get his diploma. There were maybe 30 other people in the ceremony, all of them adult learners who'd taken non-traditional paths to graduation. But when David's name was called, Mr. Chen stood up and cheered like David had just won the Nobel Prize. After the ceremony, David found Mr. Chen in the crowd. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Wouldn't have missed it for the world," Mr. Chen said, his eyes suspiciously wet. "Your mom would be proud." David's face crumpled for a second, but he held it together. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, I think she would." The next step was college. David applied to the local community college to study business and digital marketing. He'd found something he was good at, helping small businesses get online, and he wanted to learn how to do it better. Mr. Chen helped him fill out the financial aid forms, navigate the bureaucracy, figure out the whole confusing process. When the acceptance letter came, David ran into the shop waving it like a flag. "I got in. I actually got in." Mr. Chen hugged him, something they'd gotten more comfortable with over the years. "Of course you got in. You earned it." David moved into a dorm on campus. It was only 3 miles away, but it felt like he was moving across the country. Mr. Chen helped him carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, his old knees protesting every step. When everything was unpacked, they stood in the tiny room looking at each other, neither one quite sure what to say. "You going to be okay?" David asked. "Me? I'll be fine. You're the one heading off to college." "I'll visit," David said quickly. "Every weekend. I promise." "You better," Mr. Chen said. "Someone's got to help me with that website. I still can't figure out how to upload photos." They both laughed, but there was something sad underneath it. An acknowledgement that this chapter was ending and a new one was beginning. David did visit every weekend. Sometimes he'd bring homework and study in the back room just like old times. Sometimes he'd bring friends from school. And Mr. Chen's bookshop would fill with young voices and energy in a way it hadn't in decades. Sometimes he'd just sit with Mr. Chen and drink tea and talk about nothing in particular. 2 years at community college turned into acceptance at a 4-year university. David was going to study business management with a focus on digital media. Mr. Chen closed the shop for the day to attend David's graduation ceremony. This time there were hundreds of graduates, and it took forever for them to call David's name. But when they finally did, Mr. Chen stood and cheered just as loud as before. After graduation, David got a job offer in Los Angeles, a tech startup that helped small businesses with their online presence. The pay was good. Really good. Better than David had ever dreamed of making. "I don't know if I should take it," David said, sitting in the bookshop late one night. Why not? Mr. Chen asked. Because what about you? What about the shop? Mr. Chen smiled. David, I was running this shop for 35 years before you showed up. I think I can manage. But you're 82 now. What if something happens? Then something happens, Mr. Chen said. You can't put your life on hold for an old man. This is your chance. Your crossroads. Take it. So David took the job and moved to Los Angeles. They talked on the phone every Sunday. Long conversations where David would tell Mr. Chen about his work, his tiny apartment, the weird people he met in California. And Mr. Chen would tell David about the shop, about which customers had asked after him, about the new coffee blend he was trying. Years went by. David moved up in the company. Then he left to start his own business, helping small companies build their online presence. He was good at it. Really good. His business grew. He hired employees, opened an office, started making the kind of money that seemed unreal to a kid who'd once stolen $60 to buy weed. Mr. Chen followed it all from his bookshop, proud and a little amazed. Sometimes he'd see articles about David online, interviews where David talked about entrepreneurship and digital marketing. In one interview, David mentioned Mr. Chen, calling him the person who saved my life. The article brought a whole new wave of customers to the shop. People who wanted to meet the old man who'd helped a homeless teenager become a success story. But the shop was struggling again. Not because of lack of customers, but because Mr. Chen was getting old. Really old. At 84, his body was starting to give out on him. His knees hurt constantly. His hands shook when he tried to shelve books. Some days he couldn't remember if he'd eaten breakfast or not. He thought about closing, selling the building, retiring to some sunny place where old people went to wait for the end. But every time he got close to making that decision, he'd remember that night 12 years ago when a soaking wet teenager had huddled in his doorway, and he'd think about all the moments since then. All the choices that had led him here. Then one day, a sleek black car pulled up outside the shop. Mr. Chen was sitting behind the counter doing a crossword puzzle, something he did more and more these days since his eyes were too tired to read. The bell above the door chimed. Mr. Chen looked up. A young man walked in. He was wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than Mr. Chen made in a month. His hair was professionally styled. He had the kind of confidence that comes from success, from knowing you've made it. It took Mr. Chen a second to recognize him. When he did, his pen slipped from his fingers. David? David's professional composure cracked. His eyes were suddenly wet. Hey, Mr. Chen. They met in the middle of the shop and hugged. David had to bend down now. Mr. Chen had shrunk with age, gotten smaller and more fragile. But his grip was still strong. What are you doing here? Mr. Chen asked. I thought you were in Los Angeles. I was, David said. I am. But I came back because I have something important to ask you. He pulled out a folder full of papers, business documents, contracts, financial projections. I want to buy this building, David said. I want to expand the shop. Turn it into a community hub. Bookshop, coffee place, event space, somewhere people can gather and connect and feel like they belong. But I can't do it without you. I need you to stay on. Be the heart of the place. It wouldn't work without you. Mr. Chen stared at him, unable to process what he was hearing. David, I'm 84 years old. I can barely climb stairs anymore. You want to invest your money in this place with me? I don't want to invest in this place, David said. I want to invest in what this place represents. Second chances, kindness, community, all the things you taught me. You saved my life, Mr. Chen. Let me return the favor. Mr. Chen sat down heavily in his chair. His old heart was beating too fast. This was too much. Too big. There's something else, David said. A documentary filmmaker has been following my work. They want to do a story about my journey from homeless teenager to entrepreneur, and they want to include you, show how one act of kindness changed both our lives. I don't need to be in a documentary, Mr. Chen said. Maybe not, David said, but other people need to see it. Need to see that helping someone isn't naive or stupid or dangerous, that sometimes it's the most important thing you can do. Mr. Chen looked around his shop, at the worn carpet and the flickering lights and the thousands of books on the shelves. He thought about all the stories they contained, all the crossroads and choices and moments that changed everything. Okay, he said finally. Okay, let's do it. David smiled, that same smile Mr. Chen had first seen 12 years ago, scared and defensive in a doorway. Except now it was full of hope and possibility and gratitude. The documentary came out 6 months later. The footage of Mr. Chen and David reuniting in the bookshop, both of them crying, went viral. Millions of people watched it. The story of the old shopkeeper and the homeless teenager became something people shared and talked about and used to remind themselves that goodness still existed in the world. And the bookshop? It became exactly what David had promised. A place where people gathered, where they belonged, where they could find not just books but hope. The grand opening of the renovated bookshop happened on a Saturday in late spring. Mr. Chen stood near the door, watching people stream in. The line wrapped around the block. He'd never seen anything like it. The shop had been transformed but somehow still felt like home. The old wooden shelves were still there, refinished but the same ones Mr. Chen had been dusting for 40 years. A coffee bar stood in one corner. Comfortable chairs invited people to sit and stay and read, and everywhere were photos from the documentary, showing Mr. Chen and David through the years. People kept coming up to Mr. Chen, shaking his hand, thanking him for inspiring them. It was overwhelming. David took the small stage at 3 o'clock. "When I was 16 years old, I thought my life was over," he said into the microphone. "I had no money, no home, no future. Then one night, in the middle of a rainstorm, I ended up in the doorway of this bookshop, and this old man, this complete stranger, opened the door and let me in." David's voice cracked with emotion. "Mr. Chen saved my life, but he didn't try to fix me. He didn't treat me like a charity case. He just gave me space to exist, to figure out who I was. He treated me like I was a human being worthy of respect and kindness, and that simple thing changed everything." Mr. Chen felt tears running down his face. "So this space is my way of saying thank you," David continued. "We're also launching the Chen Foundation today. It's going to provide housing assistance, educational support, and job training for homeless youth, because there are thousands of kids out there right now, sleeping in doorways thinking their lives are over, and they deserve the same chance I got." The crowd erupted in applause. David came over and hugged Mr. Chen, both men crying openly. As evening came, David found Mr. Chen sitting by the fireplace. "You know what's strange?" Mr. Chen finally said. "All those years I thought I was just an old man selling books, living a small life. But the most important thing I ever did was open a door, one simple act of kindness, and it rippled out in ways I never could have imagined." "You gave me something too," Mr. Chen continued. "You gave me proof that my life mattered, that I mattered. You showed me that one person can still make a difference." "I'll always remember," David said quietly. "I know," Mr. Chen said, "and that's enough. That was really the whole story. One person in need, one person willing to help, one door opening instead of closing. That's all it took to change everything." Mr. Chen thought about all the books on the shelves surrounding them. Thousands of stories about heroes and adventures, but none felt as real or as important as the one he'd lived. Kindness wasn't weakness or naivety. Kindness was the most powerful thing in the world. That night, lying in bed, Mr. Chen thought about his wife. He wondered what she would think about all this. He thought she'd probably smile and tell him she was proud. Mr. Chen was 84 years old now. His body was failing bit by bit, but he'd lived long enough to see something wonderful happen, long enough to know that his life had mattered. Sometimes the greatest adventures don't involve traveling to distant lands. Sometimes the greatest adventure is just opening a door when it would be easier to walk away, just holding space for someone who's lost, just believing that people are worth saving. That was his story. A story about hope and second chances and the unshakable belief that kindness, real kindness given freely and without expectation, has the power to change the world. One door at a time. One person at a time. One act of love at a time. That's how you change everything. That's how you save the world.